Hey guys, it's Pat here again. It's Valentine's Day, so we're going to talk about ladies' best friends, diamonds. There's three main ways to get diamonds in Forge of Empire. The first and most obvious way to get diamonds is to just buy them. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I am going to leave you with a couple tips on this. First is that it's always better to buy diamonds in bulk instead of small quantities. If you look at the diamond per dollar amount, you'll see that you get a lot more diamonds per your dollar if you buy the bigger packages. So instead of spending 20 bucks a month because that's what you're used to doing, just why don't you save up to 100 and buy the 100 pack or the 80 pack. The second thing to keep in mind is that right before events, there's always a big sale where you get 200% or something of that nature. That's always the best time to buy diamonds. Then usually during the event, halfway through or right before one of the big items comes up, there's going to be another chance to buy diamonds. That's kind of tipping you off that the next piece is going to be an important one. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, if you're not going to buy diamonds, there's two other ways to collect diamonds in Forge of Empires. The first is the Wishing Well farm, and the second is to do Guild Expedition and Guild Battlegrounds to farm diamonds. I'm going to run through the pros and cons of each real quick. First of all, with the Wishing Well farm, the nice thing about it is that it's a constant passive stream, meaning that once you get all of your wishing wells set up, you don't have to log in and spend 30 minutes on GE every week. You don't have to keep farming goods and fighting and leveling your great buildings and all that. Basically, you log in, you collect, and you're done. In fact, on my Wishing Well worlds, I just do the 5 diamond auto collect for everything, and I'm out. Takes 10 seconds, collect, spend. It's great. The next thing is that there's a much higher weekly max. With Expedition and Battlegrounds, you probably max out around 150 diamonds a week per world. And with the Wishing Well farms, if you have enough wishing wells, you can make 200, 300, 400 diamonds a week. It's really just a matter of how big your farms are and how many worlds you have. There's a much longer or much lower long-term maintenance, meaning that once it's set up, you don't have to keep playing in order to keep getting diamonds like you do in the Expedition and Battlegrounds. And then the last pro is that as your wishing well farms get more developed, you can actually convert them into a hybrid and do both Expedition and a little bit of Battlegrounds. Personally, I'm taking all of my worlds up to Contemporary. I know it's a really easy age to do GE. So as I get there, I don't know that I'll expand much past that. I think that that's kind of a nice little sweet spot because you have enough space to build a nice world and all that, and yet you're not gonna get bogged down with all the challenging goods like the orichalcum and promethium and all that nonsense. Okay, off topic. The bad parts or the downsides of the Wishing Well farms is that it does take a long time to build up and you're dependent on events. So if you're dealing with an event like the summer event or this upcoming St. Patrick's Day event where there's not really a lot of ways to specifically target wishing wells, it can take you a while to get built up. And the other thing is that wishing wells are really not very good producers by themselves. I don't ever recommend wishing wells in your main world. And even in a secondary world, unless it's a wishing well farm, it's probably not worth having. You really got to have, I would say, about 50 wishing wells before you really even start noticing how much you're getting from it. I'm going to jump out of here and go to this real quick. Here on the wiki, we see that you get 50 diamonds from the wishing well 1.25% of the time. So in theory, if you have 50 wishing wells, you'll get 50 diamonds every other day, and roughly. So if you have 200 wishing wells or 250 wishing wells, then you're looking at getting 150 a day, which comes out to about 1,000 a week, which is pretty good. Okay, and back to our little slideshow. Now, when you compare that with the Expedition, the nice thing about Expedition is it's a lot faster to start earning diamonds. You can start an Expedition world and you don't have to worry about events and all of that stuff. You can just build your city up real quick and start working. So it's really easy to set up. You don't have a whole lot of planning required. The big downside with it is that, first of all, you have to stay proactive. If you stop doing GE, you stop getting diamonds, and that kind of stinks. And then the other thing is that it's harder to scale, meaning that with your wishing well farm, you could move up to, like, say, a progressive farm, and then make another one and run it up to progressive and do that. Heck, you could probably do 5 at a time if you really wanted to. And that really isn't a whole lot of extra sweat off your back. Whereas with the expedition ones, to continue to do that, it's a lot of extra playtime and work, and over the long haul, you're not likely to maintain that as well. And then the last part, which kind of goes along with that, is that you have to level your great buildings. With the wishing well farm, you don't really have a whole lot of great buildings that you need. I pretty much only do the LOA and the arc for a wishing well farm, and I'll get into that in a couple minutes. So with your expedition and battlegrounds, you likely are going to have to level your attack buildings, depending on how you set it up. So that's for another video. This video, we're going to focus specifically on the wishing well farms and how to maximize it. Now, this right here is what I would consider to be my most Spartan and primitive wishing well farm, and I'm going to do a quick overhead view using the FOE helper to kind of show you some layout tips. A couple things to notice is, one, we don't have any road along the edge of the city. This is actually a really important thing. I had made the mistake of being lazy and having road along the edge of my city, and I recently redesigned these, all my wishing well farms, and I was able to cut out about 30 or 40 blocks of road from each of those, and that's actually 3 or 4 extra wishing wells that I was able to put into my city simply by optimizing my road and not having a bunch of junk. So ideally you want to have the fewest amount of crosses possible, and then also, generally speaking, you want your long side, your short side to be touching. So like this right here is actually suboptimal, but these ones here are optimal because the short side is touching the road. Again, I'm not going to dig into that too much, but just to give you an overview of what a wishing well farm could look like. Now, the other thing to see is that there are these empty spaces, and those are actually really important for being able to complete events, and I'll get into that more later. But one of the big mistakes that I see people make with wishing well farms is they load up on so many farms that they don't leave space for building stuff like your blacksmiths or being able to build and delete. So that makes it really hard to get through events and scale your city. Let's see. We'll move on to one of my other ones to give you a different look. Now, while this is loading, the other thing to think about is how far are you going to level up and research in your wishing well worlds. Keep in mind that wishing wells give you current age goods until you hit progressive, and then once you move into modern, you start getting unrefined goods, just like the great buildings. So you're going to have to look for a different way to get current age goods to complete your research if you're going to research and advance to modern and beyond. Now, one of the big and best ways to do that is first to get slave builders and sunken treasures. Both of those can give you goods of current age. Obviously, I haven't rendered that one in particular, but they can give you goods of your current age, and that is extremely helpful for collecting those goods to be able to complete your research. And if you end up ever doing an expedition, that's also really handy. One of the other things that I do like to do on Wishing Well Worlds is to get an arc. You can buy the goods for an arc using forge points. And the nice thing about that is, first of all, it gets you off of the bottom of your neighborhood, which is kind of nice because usually when you're in the bottom of your neighborhood, you're getting attacked and plundered on a regular basis, and that can be a little bit annoying. So granted, you can't plunder a wishing well, but they can plunder your slave builders and things like that, and that can get obnoxious if you're having to do runs for an event. So that's one of the things. Also, it gives you a way to get metals, and obviously more metals translates to more space, and more space means more wishing wells, so that's really handy. Another just sort of random tip is if you're trying to figure out how many wishing wells you have, you can go into the reconstruction and then put everything in your storage, and now you can just look and see you have, here's 18 small wells, there's 69 large wells, so there we go, that's 70, it's just short of 90 wells, which is pretty good. Okay. Now, Moving on. Oh, now one other thing that I want to point out is that I don't have a whole lot of other great buildings in my city. Obviously, we've got your LOA. It's really helpful for getting up to speed initially because getting through a lot of the quest line, getting the goods for research and all of that before you have a bunch of wishing wells can be a little bit difficult. So you'll want to have your lighthouse, even if it's only leveled to say 3 or 4, it's just going to make your life a lot easier for researching and completing quest events to start with. And then I also like to have Zeus in all of my cities just because it's a really small building. It obviously it's hardly any space at all. It's easy to fit in anywhere. And it makes it so that you can fight current age units relatively well up until, I don't know, I would guess contemporary maybe. And then also it's handy for on the map and whatnot, especially if you use your tavern boost for some extra attack. That's usually enough to get through the first level of guild expedition and maybe get through a couple of fights in guild battlegrounds if necessary. But I don't have a lot of other great buildings. Like you don't see a Traz, you don't see a COA or CDM or any of that stuff in a true wishing well farm because that's taking up space that could be used for wishing wells. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, with the Ark, it's kind of a net positive because you're getting the diamonds from that. So I'm going to move to my last wishing well farm, and this is kind of a hybrid farm. It had started off for expedition, and it turned into a wishing well farm along the way when I kind of stopped wanting to mess with expedition. And this is actually super handy to have. Now here you can see in modern, I'm not getting refined goods. So I've got these slave builders and sunken treasures as a way of continuing to generate current age goods. Also, we've got the event buildings like this one here, the Olympic Treasury. We've got the Winter Spire, which I'm actually going to reno that when I get to postmodern in a little bit. Whoa, that was kind of cool. So I magically collected an incident that I didn't even see. I gotta love it. Except Space Needle sucks. But anyway, I digress. When you're looking at these event buildings, my tendency as a fighter was always to go ahead and go for either the attack because you're a fighter or the forge points because obviously forge points help you lower level. But for wishing well worlds, I actually recommend going with the goods one. I never used to do that before, but after getting to modern and seeing that wishing wells aren't going to give me current age goods, I realized that there's a lot of benefit to getting those free constant stream of current age goods for a wishing well world. Another thing to keep in mind is that with a wishing well world, you're going to want to have space to be able to shift in different buildings. So here, once you get to 2-lane road and you can't just dump stuff in on the outer edges of your city, what I like to do is I like to have one 2-lane road block and then a nice space that's roughly 6x6 that I can squeeze in any building I need to. So especially if you're doing some fighting, like this one's a more advanced one. I've got a Traz. I can drop in a barrack and collect. I can put in a food packing or whatever your goods building is and kind of help to speed up the process. And that actually reminds me, before I forget, you always, early on especially, you always want to be producing as many goods as possible because there are quests that require you to donate goods. And when you're trying to zip through the quest line as quickly as possible, usually it's faster to donate goods than it is to collect them. As an alternative, you can trade goods. I'll get into that in a few minutes. But the point is, it's really important to keep some flex space in your wishing well worlds, or else you'll find that when you get moving on an event, you can get hung up. So kind of projecting out into the future of a wishing well world and going back to the other two, I would say that as a general goal would be to push up through progressive and kind of camp in progressive until you are pretty well maxed out on the wishing wells that you can fit in your city, and then start looking at moving into modern. But you also want to start collecting these sunken treasures and slave builders as mentioned, to get current age goods, but also because they give you a nice space-saving alternative to blacksmiths for filling in your current age productions. And I'm going to actually look at an event and the quest line to talk about how to get through that a little bit more quickly in just a second. So actually, heck, I'm gonna go to it now. So the event that just finished was the Forge Bowl. This was actually a really great event for me. One of my worlds, I ended up getting like 20 wishing wells. I don't have enough room to put them all in. So this worked out really great. Before you get too gung ho into a event, definitely look and make sure that there's going to be an opportunity to get wishing wells as a daily prize. I know that the upcoming event currently in 2020 is going to be the St. Patrick's Day event. It doesn't have daily prizes, so there's no way to target wishing wells. And for me personally, that really cuts my motivation for trying to complete the event. If the event set piece gave me a lot of goods or something like that, I might go for it. But generally speaking, those are the types of events that are better to skip and to conserve your goods and to just kind of prepare for research and moving up. Or you can use that time to maybe buy goods from a seller on your server that you can use for research in the future. So there's definitely a lot of different ways you can approach it. Now, one of the other big things to also keep in mind is that you're going to have cases where you are the wishing well and the wishing well shrink kit have already passed as a daily prize. Now here's the shrink kit. All right, that one's gone, and then the wishing well is gone, and then you've got another more than a week of time where you're going to be collecting currency, whether it's footballs or yoga mats or whatever it is. I don't know, but whatever you're spending whatever your currency is, leaves and whatnot, apples, I don't know. What are you going to buy with that extra? And there's a couple of things to go for. One are the renovation kits, and that comes back to getting goods of current age. Again, it's really a concern for if you're going to go past progressive into modern and beyond, but it is definitely worth keeping an eye out for those. Excuse me. The metal packs are surprisingly good. I was actually really disappointed at first that I was going to have to buy metals with my currency. And then on all my worlds I did that on, I actually ended up having a couple of expansions, victory expansions that I was able to unlock because of that. So I actually kind of feel like it's a little bit underrated, especially for players that are advanced and have a high level arc and things like that in their main worlds. You kind of take for granted how many medals you have. So there's a lot more to it than what we probably realize. And then the last thing to keep an eye out for is buildings that give you lots of gems or sell really well in the antique dealer or the auction house, because you will see shrunken treasures and the slave builders come up in the auction house on a regular basis, and you're going to want to have currency to be able to buy those so that you can sub those into your city, and it just makes life a lot easier. All right. So I think the next thing and kind of the last thing to go over is just how to get through quest lines quickly. Because in my mind, the idea of a wishing well world is a world that is meant to be extremely low maintenance. I want to come in and spend maybe 5 minutes on this tops per day. Generally, like I said, I pay the 5 diamonds to collect my city. I go into research, I dump my research, and I'm done. So, and I think that's the best way to make it scalable, because you could do several of these in unison if you wanted. So, okay, 2 things. One is that when you're picking your quest, once you have the daily, the characters or the players, whatever option it is that you have, you want to do the cost per currency, and you want to pick the lowest cost per currency, right? So in this case, this is the 74 person, but if you were to run the boost with I guess you could pick a coach and you could do even better. Then at that case, then it's this guy who's 41. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that you want to maximize your currency for getting the most of the daily special possible. And usually the wiki will tell you which person to choose, and don't stray from it. In fact, make a note on some paper on a notepad if you're on the app or device, or if you have a computer, maybe have it in a separate window where you can look and just know, hey, if I see 41, I'm going to do that. If I see 60, if I see 62, those are the ones I'm going to pick. It just makes it a lot faster to get through, and it helps to make sure that you're spending your currency and you're getting the most wishing wells and wishing well shrink kicks as possible, as quickly as possible. All right, wrapping this up, getting through the quest line. So again, one of the big things about a wishing well world is that you have a minimal amount of resources. You're not running tons of supply buildings, and you don't have an ark and a chateau to pump out forge points and to pump out supplies at will. So you kind of have to be creative. And when you have to gather supplies, you don't want to have to sit there and do a bunch of 5-minute runs or wait 5 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours or however long to gather supplies. So here's some quick tricks on how to get through a quest line fast. It's not just for wishing wells. You can do this in your main world or any world, but in a wishing well world, these are ways that I approach it. First of all, the spending the forge points. Now, if you don't already have forge points in your bank added up, one of the things that you can do is you can save your event rewards. So usually you have some kind of tiered bronze league or silver league or whatever league it is that you land in at the end of an event. Instead of just opening that package and redeeming it right away, wait until the start of the next event. Then when you open that package, you can immediately use those forge points to push through whatever the quest is. And that's just a nice quick way, again, to kind of save time and not have to wait for your bar to fill up, wait 10 hours or however long you have to get the forge points you need. For gathering supplies, fastest way to gather supplies, hands down, is to just build a building and then sell it. Build it, sell it, build it, sell it. Generally speaking, you're going to get the most supplies from housing and from cultural buildings, and maybe barracks, but usually the cultural buildings and housing are going to be best for supplies. And if you need coins, then it's the flip side of usually supply buildings give you pretty good coins, and then also cultural buildings and barracks just in general tend to give you lots of, if they cost a lot, then when you sell it, you're going to get a lot, right? So you could just look at the cost and figure it out. All right. Building decorations, obviously pick the cheapest one. Let's see. Defeat an army or solve a simple negotiation. For defeating an army, that's something where having that Zeus leveled can be really handy. Even if it's just a level 10, it doesn't take up a lot of space, and usually that's plenty to beat a small army. And if you get in a real pinch, then you can use your tavern boost, because that's one of the most important things, is to get your tavern leveled and get tavern silver building up. You're going to use that for a few things, such as to make people enthusiastic. Say you are, like if you see here for me, even though I have a Traz, my city isn't enthusiastic. And the easiest way to get your city enthusiastic is not to build a bunch of stuff, is to just go here into your tavern boost and say, boom, I have an enthusiastic city. Boom, quest solved. That's way faster than waiting for your buildings to build or whatever it is you're going to do. Alternately, if you don't have tavern silver and you have extra population for some reason, you can delete population buildings, but that's not typically what you're going to deal with in a wishing well world. Finishing multiple productions of a certain time period. Obviously, building blacksmiths is a really good way to do that, but when you're crammed on space, then that's when these slave builders and sunken treasures come in really handy. And you can even do stuff like the magnum opus. Although, again, and I think there's another one. It's like a gingerbread house, or I don't know. I have it. Jump in one of my other worlds real quick. I'll let that load. So that's just another way to speed up. Obviously, is the blacksmiths. For recruiting units. If you have a Traz, simple way to do that is just put in a barrack of your age and collect your Traz. But an alternative is to save your expedition and use the units that you get from Guild Expedition for completing these quests. Level 1 will get you 3 units. Actually, it gets you 4 units if you do level 1. And then at level 2, you get 2 units right before each checkpoint or gate or whatever you want to call it. So this is actually a really handy and easy way to recruit units, especially if you're tight on space or tight on population and you can't fit a barrack of your current age. Let's see. For antique dealer, that's really one of the best ways for the antique dealer is if you have a browser and you can do Chrome. FOE helper lets you install, or if you install the extension FOE helper, there's this little quest line tool and it tells you what quests are coming up, so you can just kind of plan ahead. Let's see, fan shop, that's the other one. This one only gives you supplies, but it's still that smaller space, so that can be really handy too. All right, whoa, wrong one. Let's see, whoa, I need to go here, haha. So let's see, what's the next one? Donate goods. All right, this one's a big one here. Donate goods to treasury. That's a really fast way to complete a quest. And also keep in mind that when it says donate some goods, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be from your age. You can actually use Iron Age goods, or you can't do Bronze Age, but you can do Iron Age goods as a quick way to complete those quest lines. A lot of times that is faster than spending forge points if you don't have a bunch of forge points accumulated, or gathering goods. Alternatively, if you do have to gather goods, you can post trades, and that's another way to collect goods really fast, especially if you have guildmates. You can do some round robin trades to complete those. On the collecting tavern silver, that's just planning ahead, and I will say that it is super important. Get your tavern maxed out. For winning battles, that's something that you can always do in guild battlegrounds. Just wait till your attrition resets, and then with a level 10 Zeus, you should have no problem getting through those. And I think that covers most of the various types of quests that you'll get. Now, you may have a few things where you're required to infiltrate sectors, or to complete a sector or something like that. And in a Wishing Well world, you don't have to complete all of the sectors. You can just kind of keep moving along. So what I tend to do is I just plow ahead and leave these as incomplete as possible. So when I have to capture a province, well, I have this one sitting here, there's only one thing left to do. Or if you need to infiltrate a bunch of sectors, you can go in and infiltrate those. So that is one thing that you may not realize, is that you don't have to complete all of the sections on a map in order to keep progressing. Here's another example. Didn't complete that one, and I'm well beyond that. Onto, hey, I'll go ahead and start the scouting process. So what the point is that as long as you're planning ahead a little bit, you can make it through. I keep hitting the wrong ones. You can make it through these quest lines really quick and really easy. 5 minutes a day, check back a couple times a day, problem solved. All right, again, this video has gone way longer than intended, but I hope that it's given you a really comprehensive view on how to farm diamonds using a Wishing Well farm, ways to build it, kind of how to plan not just for, okay, how do I make a Wishing Well farm in HMA or LMA, but how do I take it all the way up to maybe some higher ages and turn it into a hybrid world where I'm not just getting Wishing Well diamonds, but I'm also being able to get expedition diamonds, pumping out hundreds of diamonds a day. If you found this video to be useful or helpful at all, please hit the like button, subscribe, share, and also if you have any topics that I haven't covered, it's early on right now and I have a lot of stuff to go over, but I would love feedback on any topics that you think would be valuable on this channel to have. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.